This is the greatest PC from the last millennium. Hello cave dwellers, yes, it's quite a bold claim and one I struggle to say with a straight face, but there is logic behind it. Primarily, my flimsy argument goes, this appeared in PC World magazine in December of 1999 as number one in their list of powerful PCs. They had a budget, mid-range and power PC breakdown, and this was top of the list of the powerful ones. So there you go, there's my argument. Fight back in the comments section if you disagree with me. I'll probably disagree with myself down there, but there's another reason why it's on the desk here. I've done two stupid things. Number one, I put it out on display because I quickly needed to fill a gap in the display for visitors to come and try out lots of different PCs. And I thought, looks like a good one. We'll get it up there. We'll get it up and running. And I'll get round to servicing it at some point in the near future. Big mistake because it quickly died. I should have serviced it before I even put it out for people to use. And then the really big mistake I made was when it went pop, I thought that's the power supply. There's no sign of life. There's no post beeps. There's no error codes. I'll go and grab another ATX power supply because that's the connector that's in there on the power supply. Swapped it out, plugged in the other power supply, pressed power, and got a nose full of a very disgusting electrical smoke smell. You know the type of smell. You've probably all smelt it before trying to fix things. And yeah, on reading up on it, it turns out that Dell's power supplies in this machine use what looks like a standard ATX connector, but they've switched two of the wires round, so I probably completely fried the motherboard. It then got pilfered for parts, it went in the cupboard, and it's languished there until today, when I want to spend the next 15 or 20 minutes turning it into something usable and restoring it to its former glory with a box of parts that I've got hold of. Let's take a look around it then. It's a pretty typical beige big box PC of the day, a tower PC. At the time, I would have been using a generic PC case and my own PC that I'd built from parts. We've got the service tag and the express service code on the side of the case there, but the warranty is well and truly expired, so we're going to have to fix this one ourselves. And there's not much to report on around the back. We're missing the power supply at the top. There are cards missing that were installed at some point and blanking plates are gone. And there's very few ports. There's just your keyboard and mouse PS2 ports, two USB ports, a serial and a parallel port, and that is it. So I think what we need to do with this is strip it down completely and start again with the new parts. We may well test the board that's in there, but I'm pretty sure it's fried. I just want a working PC at the end of it so I can say I've got the greatest PC of the last millennium here in the cave. Let's open it up and see what we can make of this. We'd like to thank PCBWay.com for supporting our episode today. They aren't just about PCBs, although they do a tremendous job of that. They also offer CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, 3D printing and injection molding. If you're creating, then PCBWay.com can help you bring your project to life. Get an instant quote now over at PCBWay.com, and we thank them for their support. Of course, all of this talk of power is said in jest, because while it was a good PC for the time, you'd happily build yourself something more powerful if you were a tinkerer like I was. But it's nice to hear what the magazines thought of it, and, all being well, I intend to actually downgrade this PC, but we'll come on to that a bit later. What you did get for your money in 1999 was a Pentium 3 running at 600 MHz with 128 meg of RAM, a 20.4GB hard drive, and a 19-inch monitor, and that came with Windows 98 installed on it. It was priced in October 99 at $2,459. With inflation, that's $3,667 today, or £2,900, so it's a serious chunk of change to drop on a PC. As I strip the PC down here, the price was reflected in the build quality. It's really easy to take apart, and if a Dell engineer was assigned to come onto site for a warranty repair, they could easily swap any piece of this system out really quickly and easily. You can take the motherboard out, for example, with just two screws, one to take the side off and then one to remove the motherboard. And I didn't cut myself once on any sharp edges. Now, if that's not a mark of quality in a 90s PC, I don't know what is. It's actually a lot dirtier than I expected, and perhaps dirtier than it's showing up on camera, and I'll be giving the whole thing a deep clean. And if I have to touch this thing, I'm going to get you up close too. Take a look at this. Dust. The skin particles of PC enthusiasts past. It's not my idea of patina though, but I am happy to put it in a jar if somebody really wants it. Let's put the electronics to one side, away from the water now, and let's get scrubbing. Yes, it's time for a PC cleaning montage. Into our soapy water goes the PC. As usual, I'm using car shampoo, all the soapy goodness with none of the salt. And it's looking particularly green today. I don't think I've diluted it as much as I normally do, but it'll do. And everything here is going to get a fingertip clean. I want this thing to be cleaner than the day it came out of the box 24 years ago. The air blower you see me use in there, and I use it in quite a few videos, that's called a CompuCleaner Expert. A few of you have asked in the past, and it's way more convenient than compressed air cans or a noisy air compressor. So I'll pop a link in the video description if you're interested in that. It has been a while since we saw Mrs. RMC Retro's toothbrush on the channel, but it's still the best tool for getting into hard to reach PC crevices. With the big case parts cleaned, it's time to clean up the cables, the buttons, the drives, and absolutely everything else. There's no reason to replace the cables that are in here, they just need a good clean. When I took a look at the IDE cables in particular, one of them was really filthy. Perhaps it was in the firing line of the airflow going through the case and it just grabbed all of the dust. But yeah, there was a really nasty build-up on it. The original 20GB hard drive is missing from the system, so we'll have to find a modern replacement for that. And there should be no reason why we can't use the CD rewritable and the DVD ROM drives from the system, but they do need a good clean as well. And it's not just on the outside where they're dirty. I want to strip them down, so we'll start with the DVD drive here. The way the dirt has built up inside these drives makes me think that the PC probably had a long life of use, because dirt doesn't find its way into some of the places I'm finding it unless you've actually got airflow blowing around in the case. This doesn't seem to be a machine that's just been sat in a damp shed, for example, doing nothing. If only PCs had a way to tell us how many miles they had on the clock. I guess if we had the original hard drive, we could perhaps glean some information from that, but like I said, that's missing. My instincts though say it's been well used. Inside the optical drives, I just wanted to give them a blast of air to clean them, and also to just clean the laser head as well, and then give everything a general wipe down. I'm using these lint-free microfiber swabs. It's a nice alternative to regular cotton buds. They still have their use too, but these are really useful, and I'm just using some isopropyl alcohol to clean everything up. We'll put that drive back together then and just take a quick look at the second drive, and you can see this one too needs a blast of air and a good cleanup. It's a simple thing to do, but it will help with the longevity of these things. There we go, good as new and ready to burn CDs again. The floppy drive gets a quick service. I know this was working before the system popped, but I always like to refresh the grease inside them to give the motor a fighting chance of lasting a little bit longer. So we'll strip away all the old grease on the worm screw there. I'm using another swab and some IPA to give that a good old clean. And then we'll just dab some new grease on there and work it into it. I'll also give the drive heads a clean, and then have a general wipe around inside so that any dirt that's in there doesn't get kicked up again straight onto the heads or working its way into the discs themselves.
On the table here now is the original motherboard and CPU, which I suspected I blew up in my hastiness. So a top tip now for you: never try to fix a PC 10 minutes before opening the museum, or you'll end up doing what I did and just making things worse by plugging in the wrong power supply. But I do now have a replacement Dell PSU from the same model of system, so I thought it was worth testing out this board to see if there is any life in it. There are no visibly blown components on it, no charring, nothing to suggest that anything terrible has happened. It was just the smell of it when I plugged it in that made me think something's gone horribly wrong. The board is an Intel 440BX based motherboard. Now these appeared in 1998 and supported slot 1 and later socket 370 processors, officially up to 1 GHz, but some unsupported mods could run them faster. It was a very popular chipset with manufacturers and hobbyists alike, so I'm pleased to see one in here. Now I should explain my comments earlier about downgrading the system. The first video card that I grabbed to put in here was this. It's an NVIDIA GeForce MX 440 from 2002, so that's 3 years newer than the system itself. And it's fine for some direct 3D gaming. But then I had an idea, and bear with me, as all will become clear shortly. I thought I'd save that GeForce for another system, and instead I opted to put in this ATI Rage Pro Turbo. It's an AGP card, and it takes us back to around 1997-98. Now why would I do that? Well, it's because I don't care about the 3D performance of this card. I've got something else for that. First though, we need a working system. So let me show you the fault, and this is the original Dell power supply, and notice how it has both a larger ATX style connector and a smaller AT style connector to plug into the board. If I put power through it with it plugged into the board, I'm seeing nothing. This is a dead PSU. There's no sign of life whatsoever. Here's my replacement PSU, and if I put power through this one, I can see that our 12 volts does appear correctly going to the board. We've also got a healthy 5 volt rail, and if we check that smaller AT style connector into the board, that's given us 3.3 volts, which is all correct and as it should be. So our replacement PSU is actually fine. Now out of interest, I thought I'd plug a monitor in and see if there was any life at all on the board, and to my surprise and delight, it came to life. So the acrid electronics smell that I got when I put the wrong power supply into it must have been coming from that wrong power supply and not the board. This is great news, because not only do I now have a working system, I've also got a spare motherboard and CPU for it, and they can be on standby for any future issues. Great news. As I'm on a mission to remove any traces of dust, I had a look inside the replacement PSU and it looks pretty clean, so I think somebody's already been in here and given it a blast. There's no way it could have stayed that clean for this long. Let's get to rebuilding our PC then. Instead of the original 128 meg of RAM, I've got 512 meg in my spare parts box, so we'll slot them in here. That is a huge amount of RAM for the period, and it looks great having all of those slots filled up. Other replacement parts that I have now include a replacement fan and a shroud, as the clips on the old one had snapped. So that slots into the rear of the case there, and then the fan slots into the shroud, and then the shroud slots over the fan and over the processor. So that really creates a focus of cooling around that Pentium 3 CPU. That will do a good job in keeping it cool, I hope. The PSU slots into the top of the case there, and then with that in place we can wire up the motherboard and we can wire up our drives and we can get some upgrades into this thing. There's our Rage video card in, and now to complement that, I've got one of my favourite upgrades of recent years. This is the Orpheus One sound card, which offers brilliant DOS Sound Blaster compatibility, and I've also got an add-on wavetable board there for lush MIDI music. I've got a whole episode dedicated to this sound card, so Do check out the link if you're interested in finding out more about that. The sound card goes into our motherboard's ISA slot. I forgot to say actually, it's really nice that this motherboard has ISA, PCI and AGP on the motherboard, which makes it great for a whole host of upgrades or downgrades. Now here's the exciting bit. On 3D gaming duty, a Diamond Monster 3D 2. This is a Voodoo 2 3DFX card, and it's what I decided to base the whole system around. This for me was peak 3DFX gaming. Before Microsoft's DirectX and Direct 3D caught up and everything kind of went in that direction, we had this wonderful period of games which used 3DFX's Glide API. And what could be better than one 3DFX card? Well, two of course. You'd be lucky to have one, but you'd be a really rich gamer to have two and enjoy SLI or scanline interleaves. Multiple cards working in parallel to produce a single output. So our two cards here are going to render alternate horizontal lines of pixels, and they'll be combined together to give us the full frame. These cards wouldn't be out of place in a Pentium 2, so why a Pentium 3? Well, my thinking here is that I want this to be a showcase for the Voodoo 2 in DOS and in Windows with no bottlenecks. It's not unfeasible that the Dell might have had SLI Voodoo cards in it in 1999, but it's likely to have had something newer. But in this system, I can be sure that nothing, the CPU, the RAM, the modern solid-state hard disk I'm installing here with an IDE adapter on it, nothing at all is holding back the power of the 3DFX cards, and we can enjoy this particular era of gaming to its fullest. It's a mythic Voodoo PC of the 90s where we don't have to worry about tweaking every last clock cycle out of our machines to squeeze the frame rates. We can just enjoy the hardware. The finishing touch for the system is a compact flash card as a secondary storage device which is accessible from the rear. That will just help me easily transfer files to the system, and the video cable to feed the output of our Rage video card into our Voodoo card where the 3D output is combined with the 2D. Much like the Sega 32X we saw in last week's video. And then, with that all put together and the machine nice and clean, we can get to seeing what this bit of Voodoo magic is capable of. I've opted to install Windows 98 2nd edition on this PC, and we've got a startup menu when you turn it on which lets you choose to go straight into DOS or to go into Windows. And that's where I began, installing games, installing the drivers for the ATI video card here, and other things like 3D Mark 99. And it was in 3D Mark that I got my first glimpse of the dual Voodoo 2s in action. Locked in at 30 frames per second on this Wipeout style test, I'd have been really happy with this performance back in the day. And the first person demo too, that ran really nicely as well. But we won't dive too deeply into benchmarking. I want to try games. I want to try the first game I ever applied a 3DFX patch to. So that takes us back to Voodoo 1 territory in 1996 with Tomb Raider. Seeing the load taken off the CPU to render the game by the 3DFX card and its specialised 3D hardware was a monumental moment in gaming for me. I'll try and explain. This is the game in software mode, and the Pentium 3, being as powerful as it is for this era of game, actually manages software rendering really well with a good frame rate. So the effect isn't quite as impressive as it was for me back in the day running on lesser hardware, but you can see textures warping as the game moves, and it is noticeable that this is software rendering. But when we switch now to the 3DFX patched version of the game, you can see there's a huge leap in image quality. The textures are behaving, the edges are smooth. It's just an all-round nicer game to look at. This isn't pushing an SLI Voodoo 2 setup, of course, but remember my goal is a PC that showcases that golden era of Glide gaming, and Voodoo 1 games definitely fall into that category. The next 3DFX patch game I was obsessed with was Carmageddon, and here we see it running smoother than any hardware I've ever owned. The 1997 game combined combat and racing so well, and I'm running it in the censored zombie mode here to spare you from the full gore of the game. It had 3D car models that crumple, it had weighty feeling physics, and it had large free roaming levels that really benefited from the heft of the 3DFX cards. And it runs as smooth as butter. First-person shooters were as big then as they are now, so we'll try some of those, and Quake 2 from December 1997 runs beautifully. These are all captured by pointing the camera at the CRT, by the way, so it's not going to be sharp as a direct capture. It's just some experiments I'm doing lately, and I quite enjoy capturing games in this way. Let's push our system harder again, and we go now into November of 1999, an Unreal tournament. The original Unreal Engine used software rendering before it then focused in specifically on Glide for 3DFX cards, and then later OpenGL and Direct 3D support was added. So in the early period of Unreal, 3DFX owners really enjoyed much better performance than alternatives out there. And in this game, it's certainly shining. The frame rates are great and it is very playable. I did eventually, though, start to find the limits of this machine with Return to Castle Wolfenstein. It's perfectly playable, but the frame rates do start to just drop a little bit in the outdoor areas. If I wanted to play games like this or Battlefield 1942, I would be leaving that GeForce card in or more powerful cards. This is not the era I'm interested in for this machine, and it wasn't long after this game was released in early 2002 when Nvidia completed their acquisition of 3DFX, and Glide would start to become a distant memory for gamers. So that's looking forward to test the limit, but this machine is very friendly in its backwards compatibility. It runs DOS natively, of course, and that Orpheus ISA sound card will quite happily play all the classics. Duke Nukem 3D, for example, is in no way accelerated by a 3DFX card, but it's nice to be able to dip into it on the same machine. Or maybe you'd like to play some LucasArts classics like Monkey Island or Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade here. Or how about some real-time strategy with Warcraft 2? So this takes us back to 1995. And this one actually ran too quickly. It made scrolling around the map an absolute nightmare with the mouse or with the keyboard. So what I had to do was use a tool like MoSlow here. In this example, I'm telling it to run the system at 20% of the normal speed when we use this game, and I've put it in the launch box configuration. So when you select the game from the menu, it will automatically kick that MoSlow command in, and the game will become playable, and the person sitting down to play it doesn't need to be aware of that. It will just happen. Well, another public day draws to a close here at the cave. We've had visitors throughout the day, and we've had two types of visitors really who have sat down and played on this machine. And I must say, this is fast becoming one of my favourite parts of this whole thing. We fix up a machine, we clean it up, we get it looking and running like new, and then we invite people to come and play it at the weekends and share it, which is a really nice part of this job. It's crazy calling this a job, but it's a really nice part of it. We've got two types of people. Those that come up and look at it and go, wow, it's an SLI Voodoo 2 machine. That's incredible. I could only have ever dreamed of having a machine like this. And those who just don't care about that side of things whatsoever. They see Quake 2, they see Unreal Tournament, they see Carmageddon, and they just enjoy playing those games without any stuttering, without any frames being dropped, without any lag, and they just enjoy that experience. And that is the beauty of this machine. It's a very personal build because the XPS T600, there was also a T500 you could buy at the same time, a cheaper machine, and it actually came with a Voodoo 3 in it. And I could have reached up here and grabbed this and installed a Voodoo 3 3000 PCI in the machine. There would have been nothing wrong with doing that. But as I say, this was a personal build. I had a Voodoo 2 back in the day. In fact, I didn't even have a Voodoo 2. I had a Banshee, which was kind of a slightly degraded Voodoo 2, but the trade-off was you got 3D and 2D on one video card. Imagine that. Just the one video card for everything. Mind-blowing. So I had that. So I never actually saw the full potential of a Voodoo 2 on my own machine, let alone an SLI machine. I didn't know anyone with a Voodoo 2 SLI setup. So I really wanted to visit all of those games that I loved so much with an SLI setup to see them completely untapped, running like a bat out of hell, full throttle. What could these games really play like? And now I get to experience that. And I make no apologies for that, for picking a machine from a certain year and using its power to enjoy software from earlier years. In 1997, I didn't have a time machine. It wasn't an option for me to see what my games ran like on 1999 hardware. But here we are, we can do it now. And I think
ultimately, that's what this build has been all about for me. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope some of you will get to come and try it out for yourselves. If you'd like to do that, head to retrocollective.co.uk where you can see when the cave's open and you can book yourself a session. If you'd really like to support the videos and what we do here, head to patreon.com/rmcretro, and you'll also get first tickets to our patron days, our all-day sessions where we have a buffet or a barbecue, we have guest speakers, and you have all day to play on this thing if you like. And I hope you've enjoyed the video, and do let me know if there are any games, whether it be Glide, Direct3D or OpenGL games that I can install on here, DOS or Windows, and just push this to the limit. Let me know what I can try out, or just good games that you know will run well on it. Any suggestions, let me know in the comments. As always, take care, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.